Hey everybody, welcome back to another daily creative challenge. My name is Jesus Ramirez. Thank you so much for being here with me today. This is a daily creative challenge number 3. Thank you so much once again for being here. Let me take a quick look at the chat and see who we've got. I see a lot of familiar faces. Tim, of course, Adobe Live, Sean, Marilyn, Patty, Jesse, Claudia from Print My Soul. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Hey, Christina from Slovakia. Awesome. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Let me know where you're watching this stream from. Before we get started, there's a couple things that I do want to mention, and let me switch my screen over so that you can see this page, which is behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. And from this page, make sure that you click on this big blue button right in the center so that you can sign up to receive Creative Cloud notifications for this challenge. Also, make sure that you go into the water effect box and click on Get Started, where you can download a PSD so you can follow along with me today. Also, if you missed any of the previous challenges, you can click on Watch Video, these big blue buttons, and also download the asset file so you can follow along with them. And of course, if you haven't heard already, we have a community where we can share our work, ask questions, and communicate with each other. To join that community, you can click on the community chat button. And from there, you can go into this page, which is the Discord app. And make sure that you go under Current Challenge. From Current Challenge, you'll see all the work that people have been producing based on the challenges that are going on this week. You can see that we got some really cool broken glass effect, which is what we worked on yesterday. We worked on album covers on the first day. So a lot of great work. So make sure that you come in here, share your work, ask questions. I'm here, the other Adobe mentors as well. So make sure that you come in here. Also check out the past challenges so you can see what other people have been working on in the past. Ask questions, tips and tricks, a whole bunch of cool stuff. Also, yesterday I mentioned that you should upload to your work on Behance and use the hashtag PSDailyChallenge. PSDailyChallenge, and a lot of you did that, and it's super cool to see a lot of the broken glass effects and the album covers in here. Thank you so much for using my photo there, Advait. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I think it's pronounced Advait. He used my photo and did a really cool poster on what we've been working on. So really good job. So come in here, check out other people's work, make sure that you post your work as well. Create a project, follow the steps, and make sure that you use the hashtag PSDailyChallenge. Also, I've noticed that some people have been tagging me on Instagram with the challenges that you've been working on, so thank you so much. I went ahead and posted my final results onto my Instagram page. I'm at JR from PTC if you want to check it out. And I used the hashtag PSDailyChallenge. And when I clicked on it, I noticed that a lot of you were also posting some of the work that we've been working on in this challenge. So thank you so much. Here's one of the challenges. Oh, again, from the same photographer who worked on the previous example that I showed. So just come in here and check out the daily creative challenges. And I see that some of these go as far back as when Claudia from Print My Soul was on there. I remember her making this juicy design and also this flat earth design. So super cool. So yeah, this is actually from Claudia's stream a couple weeks ago or a month ago now. I forget how long it was, but make sure that you come in here. If you decide to share it on Instagram, also use the hashtag PSDailyChallenge. Use the hashtag on Behance, of course. And for today's stream, make sure that you go on behance.net/challenge/Photoshop and download the water effect get started file so that you can follow along with me. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat before we get started. All right, cool. Looks just a bunch of people saying hi and hello. Oh, we have Howard Pinsky on the chat. What's up, man? Good to see you. Howard I think Howard is the original Photoshop YouTuber, but he's now an Adobe XD evangelist. But yeah, Howard's an awesome friend. I'll see you on Friday at Adobe Max. Well, I don't know. I think you live in LA. I don't know when you get there, but I'll be there Friday. Adobe Max is on Monday, so we'll all be in LA celebrating the event. All right, so let's get started with Photoshop. Let me bring it up And this is the file that you should have downloaded from that assets folder in the behance.net/challenge/Photoshop page under water effect. And there it is. It's just two layers. This guy and then these water splashes. So I saw this advertisement that I thought looked really cool. It was just an advertisement for a waterproof jacket, and it had a water splashes just splashing on the jacket. It had some rain, and it had a lot of cool effects, and I thought it would be a great challenge for today because it brings up some really interesting challenges when compositing something like that. So I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks with blending modes, groups. If you want to level it up to the next level, then we'll create some rain using filters, the fibers filters. So let me get right to it. We don't have a lot of time, so I just want to be able to show you everything in the next 20 or so minutes. Okay, so, Howard will be there Saturday. See you Saturday then. So let's get started. So this is the image that we're gonna start with. This is just this guy. You can use a photo of anything you like. I just, remember that advertisement that I was talking about. So I remember seeing a jacket and then water hitting it. So that's sort of what I'm going to try to replicate. And to select the jacket, I'm just going to use the quick selection tool. So you can click on that and then click and drag to make that selection. Notice that I've also selected his pants. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click and drag to deselect. There we go. So now we have the jacket. I say this all the time. You don't need a perfect selection. Just get it rough selection. When you're done, come back and fine tune because you never know what you're actually going to want to keep. So don't spend too much time in the beginning fine tuning selections and doing all that stuff simply because you may be wasting your time. So I just like to start with a very rough selection. It looks like I missed some of the white here in between his arms. So I'll deselect that by holding Alt. But anyway, so now that I have a very rough selection, I'm just going to click on the layer mask icon and that removes the background. So we just have the jacket. So now with the move tool, I can center the jacket just a little bit higher so that it's right in the center of the frame. And I'm going to create a background. And I'm going to create a background by using a solid color. So click on the new adjustment layer icon, and then we have our fill layers right on top, solid gradient pattern. I'm just gonna go for a solid color, and I'm going to select a dark blue. You can select whatever color you want, but I think that like a dark blue will work well in this case because we're gonna have water, we're gonna have rain, so it kind of brings in that whole theme together. Notice that now that I brought in my background, the mask is not as good as I thought, so I will refine it a little bit. You can refine the mask by clicking on the layer mask thumbnail and then going into selected mask. And I'm just going to smooth the mask a bit. So this smooths the edges of the mask. And I'm also going to shift the edge inward to try to remove some of that fringing and maybe add a tiny little bit of feather so that the mask is not so sharp. The edge of the mask is not so sharp. It'll blur it up a little bit by increasing the feather just a bit. Press OK, and that fixes our layer mask. It's not perfect, but again, I can come back and fix it later. It was just not, those lines are bothering me, the lines that were showing behind his pants. So I will now move on into the next step, which is working on the water splashes. But before I do that, I'm still think that this background's a little too bright and too saturated, so I'm just going to bring it down just a bit. So maybe something like that. So it's a little darker and not as saturated, and that looks better to my eye at least. And what we're going to do now is just go into this layer with the water splashes, and I'm going to use the lasso tool, and I'm just going to select the water splashes like so, and then I'll press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to duplicate that layer. So now I just have one water splash. But I'll do that with all the water splashes. So I'm going to do that 6 times because there's 6 water splashes. So I'm just going to select them and then we'll move on. Cool. And there we go. So we have our water splashes. And to be a little more organized, I'm just going to select my water splash, the bottom one, hold Shift, click on the top one, and press Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac. And actually, I'll put in the original one in there just so that we have somewhere to put it. But I'm just going to disable it because we're not going to need it. We're going to use these water splashes. So I guess this is like the first trick that I'm going to show you. I'm sure that a lot of you know that you can select the layer and click on the drop down menu and then select the blending mode, and that'll blend the layer with the layer below. In this case, we want to keep the brighter pixels because that's where the water is, and we want the background, which is black, to disappear. So we can use one of the lighten blending modes, which keeps bright pixels and hides dark pixels. So see, when I select lighten, see how I'm keeping the brighter pixels? So in this case, green does a really good job, and there's my water splash. Now, the trick that I wanted to show you is you can select one layer, hold shift and select multiple layers, click on another layer to select multiple layers, and then you can go into the screen blending mode, and that will apply the screen blending mode to all the layers at the same time. So now I have 6 of these water splashes with the screen blending mode. What I need to do now is make it seem as if the water is just going around him, just a bunch of splashes hitting that jacket. The water splashes are a little too big, so I'm going to select them all once again and then press Ctrl T, Command T to transform and scale them down. I just don't think the scaling was appropriate for this composite. And I'm just going to quickly place them over the jacket wherever I think it suits the shape of the jacket and what the water splash looks like. Obviously, I don't have a lot of time to fine tune my composite, but I think that you'll get the idea. You see how I'm just distorting the layers and trying to match it accordingly, so it just feels like there's like a water splash just going across the jacket. Here's a couple of tricks for you. Actually not with this layer, probably won't work well with this layer. Or actually, yeah, probably will. So I have this layer selected, and I can press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, right click, and I can select warp, and I can click on these corner handles, and I can start distorting the water so that it matches the contours of the jacket better. Or I could also use puppet warp. So with the layer selected, I can go into edit, puppet warp. It creates that mesh, and I can click to create these points. And let me disable the mesh so that you can see better how this works. See that? See how I can distort that water splash? So just with a few water splashes, you can have like an unlimited amount of water splashes. You can scale them, distort them, and do all kinds of things. So I'll commit the changes, and then I'll click and drag and place this water splash like right here. And another trick for you, if you select any layer, it doesn't really matter which one, and you hold the Alt key on Windows, Option on the Mac, you can click and drag and place a duplicate of whatever layer you had selected on another area. So I'll do something like that. But yeah, I'm just looking at the chat to see if there's any questions. Claudia's saying that she'll be at Adobe Max at the Adobe booth. Let's see. Yeah, no questions. Oh, Howard loves the puppet warp. So do I. Awesome. So with this composite almost done, we're going to work a little bit on applying a color effect. So what I really want is to have maybe a little bit of that blue tint of the background like on the jacket. And one of the ways of doing that is selecting a jacket layer and going into the selective color adjustment layer, and then clicking on this little icon. You see this little one with the square pointing down in the properties panel? You click on that, and that clips it. This little arrow pointing down to the layer below means that this adjustment layer will only affect the jacket. So what I'm going to do now is go into the neutrals and watch what happens. I can add color to the jacket, right? So I'm just going to add a little bit of cyan, maybe reduce the yellow to get blue. So the way these sliders work is you can either add or subtract the color. You can add cyan or subtract cyan. If you subtract cyan, you get red. And I didn't do it right because I'm not in the right drop down. So if I subtract cyan, you get red. If you subtract magenta, you get green. And if you subtract yellow, you get blue, because those are the opposite colors. The opposite of cyan is red, the opposite of magenta is green, and the opposite of yellow is blue. And if you forget, no worries. I think that there's another tool in Photoshop that does a better job displaying this relationship. If you go into color balance, you can see that relationship there. See that? Cyan, red, magenta, green, yellow, blue. So you can just turn on that adjustment layer just as a reference. But these sliders, whoops, I didn't quite delete that. These sliders basically do the same thing. They add or subtract the color to the color that you select from the dropdown. So I selected the neutrals, which means that now I can add a little bit of cyan, and it turns the, let me make sure I hit the neutrals dropdown again. I can add a little bit of cyan to the jacket, reduce the yellow to add a little bit of blue, and you can keep fine tuning it accordingly. So we'll just add a little bit of blue to create that effect. And if it's too strong, I can reduce the opacity, totally up to you. You have a whole bunch of options. So yeah, Shaikh wrote, RGB is the opposite of CMY, and you're missing K. Or CMY. Yeah, I guess you're more accurate than I am. CMY, red, green, blue, RGB. CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow. K, a lot of people think it stands for black. It doesn't. Stands for key, which in today's printing world is usually black, but in the olden days, it could have been blue or another dark color. But anyway. So we applied this color effect to the jacket, which I think is looking pretty cool. It might be a little strong, so I can reduce it just a little bit. Now, I would like to apply the same color effect to the color splashes. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, what you can do is you can create a selective color adjustment layer, clip it to the group. You can clip an adjustment layer to a group. And then do the same thing, right? Go into the neutrals and then adjust the cyan. And that sort of works, but notice we have a problem. And I think it's more noticeable when we change it to the red. I know we don't want it red, but it's more noticeable. See how we're making these red blobs? And I guess if I push it all the way to the blues, you can kind of see when I zoom in to the cyan. See how we're making that cyan blob? So the reason that's happening is because we're actually applying a color effect to the original black background. So what do? How do we fix that? There's one of the most efficient ways of fixing something like that, in my opinion at least, is to go into the group, and inside the group create a selective color adjustment layer. And I mean, I'm just gonna apply like a red overlay so it's easier to see, right? So we have that red overlay over the entire layer. We don't want that. So one of the things that you can do is change the blending mode of the group to screen. See that? See when I change the blending mode of the group to screen, it changes that? See how now this adjustment layer is only affecting the contents of the group? So that's a cool compositing trick that you can use. When you put a blending mode on the group, because a group's default blending mode is pass through, which means everything is going to pass through down to, to the bottom of the layer stack. So that's default. But when you change it to normal, then that makes it so that everything inside of the group, every adjustment layer inside of the group only affects the inside of the group. So that's why you get that effect there. But if we change it to screen, this adjustment layer only affects the contents of the group. And then once Photoshop makes that composite of that layer stack of that group, then it applies the screen blending mode on top of that. So then we have these water splashes with these particular colors. So now I can control the water splashes and just tint them blue a little bit. So then we have just a little bit of blue, because I don't really want them clear. I like the whole blue hue theme on this whole image. So that's how you would do that. This is how you would color things that have a blending mode applied to them. Because again, and I'll go back to where we started, if I just apply an adjustment layer to that, it's going to affect the entire layer. And if I clip that adjustment layer to the group, it's going to create these blotches of color because it's applying the color onto the dark areas of the original background. See that? See how it's black here? If I change it to screen, you see the result. So the way to fix that is to put the layer in adjustment layer inside of the group, and then change the group's blending mode to screen, and you get that result. So I hope that was clear and it helps you when you're creating composites. Let's see if there's any questions. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, no questions. Cool. We got about 5 minutes, and what I want to show you now is how to create rain. So there's several ways in which you can create waves. One of the ways that you could do it is just by painting. And I don't recall if I showed it on this particular DCC, but I think I mentioned it in a previous one, where if you have the brush tool selected, you can go into the gear icon and you can go into get more brushes. This is on Photoshop CC, by the way. More brushes, and you can download over 1,000 of Kyle Webster's free brushes. If you download the one titled Concept, you will get a brush called Rain, and you can paint rain, but that's not what we're gonna do. I just wanted to show you that that was available. Let me just find it really quick. It's down here somewhere. Here we are, raindrops. There we go. Realistic rain. So I can create a new layer and then I can paint my rain, right? So you have that option. You can paint rain with those brushes. Super cool stuff, right? Awesome. But that's not the way we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it with a pattern. And I'll show you how that works. I'm gonna create a new layer. I think there's nothing on this layer. Let me just delete it to make sure. Yeah, we'll just create a brand new one from scratch. And this one will be our rain layer. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a filter. I'm gonna go into filter, render, fibers, and we have this fibers filter. So I'm just gonna increase the strength, the variance a little bit, something like that, press OK. And this is gonna help us create our rain. Before I do anything else, I'm gonna blur it to kind of stretch the pixels. So I'm gonna go into filter, blur, motion blur, and I'm using an angle of 90 degrees, and I'm just gonna adjust the distance. And this is gonna help us create our raindrops. We want to create a seamless pattern, so we need to make sure that we don't have any seams. And to do that, you can go into filter, other, offset, and just enter horizontal value so you can push the edges of the image. You're really not going to see a seam in the vertical edges. You're only going to see it horizontally. You can see it there, like right about the center of the image, right there. So just press OK. And what you can do is you can grab an elliptical rectangle marquee tool, and then just add a feather to it. So 20 would work, 20 pixels, because we want blurry edges. We don't want a sharp edge because then we're going to create another seam. So what feather does, it just makes it so that the edge of the selection is not completely sharp, is blurry. So I just made a selection like that over the seam, and I can go into filter, blur, motion blur, and I can just increase it, press OK, and I'll probably add it again, filter, motion blur, and there you go. We don't have a seam anymore. So what I can do now is go into image, adjustment, and select threshold. Threshold either makes pixels black or white. That's it. You get black or you get white. And you can use this slider to control the pixels, right? So you can see how that's starting to look like rain a little bit, and that's what we want, something like that. I can press OK. And what I'll do now is I'll press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to duplicate the layer, and I'm just gonna drag the second layer up and change the blending mode to screen, just because I don't want to have that area with missing pixels. I just want it to be completely full. So what I'll do now is I'll just merge these two layers. You can select both layers by holding Shift and clicking on both, pressing Ctrl E, Command E on the Mac to merge. We have our layers, and I'm gonna make a pattern out of this. But before I do that, I'm just gonna add everything else into a group. Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac to put everything into a group. So now I just have that layer. Here's a keyboard shortcut that you might find useful. If you press Ctrl Alt and the number 2, which is Command Option and the number 2 on a Mac, you're gonna make a selection out of the bright pixels. So I just selected all the bright pixels in the image. And what I'm gonna do now is hide this layer, create a new layer, which is a solid color fill layer, and just select white. So now I have just a white layer here, white raindrops, I should say. And what I could do is simply go into Edit, Define Pattern, and I can call it Rain. And now when I go into my composite here, I can create a pattern, and by default, Photoshop will load the pattern that you just created. And look at this, we have rain, seamless rain. And you can scale it up, scale it down, whatever you need. And the cool thing about it is now I can just duplicate my rain layer 3 times, and maybe the one that's closest to us will be larger rain. Scale it up a bit, press OK. and then I'll right click and select rasterize. And then you can go into filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just blur the rain, you know, because we're creating a little bit of depth. So I don't have a whole lot of time, but I think you get the idea. So you can keep playing around with your rain as much as you want. To finalize the effect, I'm just gonna bring down the opacity of this layer, bring down the opacity of the other rain layers to something like that. Also, one thing you can do is right click and select rasterize, press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, scale it up, and then rotate it so it's not completely straight down, because rain wouldn't really fall just, you know, straight down like so. So I'm just, you know, turning it. And since we're using different layers, we can create a really cool effect of depth, you know, blurry layers, layers that are in focus, rotated, all kinds of different things. I have about a minute, so what I'll do is I'll stop the challenge. Feel free to keep working on it on your own. Try using the hashtag PS Creative Challenge. Remember to go onto the Discord page, which is on that link right above my head. And don't forget to download the asset files. Don't forget to upload your work onto Behance under PS Daily Challenge on Instagram, and also be back again with me tomorrow where we're going to have another Halloween themed daily creative challenge. So thank you so much for being here with me. Stick around. There's a stream coming right up after me, so take a quick bathroom break and come right back. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.